The Hidden Pages of Hollywood. Guy Madison exposed the gay actors of old Hollywood. He dated in secret. In the golden glow of 1950s Hollywood, Guy Madison was everything the public adored. A square-jawed cowboy, a war hero turned matinee idol, and the poster boy for American masculinity. But behind the studio lights and scripted smiles was a secret far more complicated than any Western plot he rode through. For years, whispers followed him of quiet glances, coded gestures, and secret rendezvous with stars whose names were never meant to be spoken in the same breath. And decades later, as time loosened lips and history begged to be rewritten, a list emerged. A private reckoning. The actors Guy Madison allegedly loved in silence, and the truth he may have carried to his grave. What he exposed before the end may just change everything we thought we knew about old Hollywood, the man they all wanted. Who was Guy Madison? Before the whispers and rumors, before the speculation and secrecy, there was just Robert Ozell Mosley, a young man from Bakersfield, California, who had no intention of becoming a star. That all changed in 1944, when a Hollywood talent scout spotted him while he was serving in the U.S. Navy. One look at that square jaw, those piercing blue eyes, and that all-American charm, and the studio saw dollar signs. Rebranded as Guy Madison, he was thrust into the spotlight with no acting experience, landing a role in the hit film Since You Went Away. Practically overnight, he became a national sensation, not just for his looks, but for the image he projected, the perfect American man. Warner Brothers and later Columbia Pictures knew exactly what they were selling. Madison's publicity photos were everywhere, framed with soft lighting and subtle masculinity, a calculated balance of strength and vulnerability. He was the face that graced countless magazines, the man women dreamed of and men aspired to be. But even as he galloped into stardom in cowboy boots and war uniforms, something lingered just beyond the camera's lens. He wasn't known for scandal nor for outrageous affairs. In fact, he was notoriously private. Some called him shy, others said he was disciplined. But those who knew him off-screen spoke differently, of the parties he didn't attend, of the quiet refusals, of how he rarely dated in public. His silence became part of the mystique. And in an era where a single photograph could ruin a career, Guy Madison perfected the art of being seen and not seen at the same time. It's only now, with hindsight and fragments of hidden testimonies, that we begin to ask, what exactly was Guy Madison trying so hard to protect? Under the studio system, where secrets were law, to understand the fear that haunted Guy Madison's footsteps, you have to understand the machinery that controlled his world. Hollywood in the 1940s and 50s wasn't just a dream factory. It was a fortress. The studio system didn't just shape careers, it dictated lives. Actors were products, and every product had to fit the mold. Contracts included morality clauses that gave studios the right to terminate deals over immoral conduct, which, in the coded language of the time, meant anything from extramarital affairs to homosexuality. Public relations firms worked hand in glove with gossip columnists to maintain carefully curated illusions. Staged dates, accidental run-ins, and marriages of convenience that provided just enough cover to keep rumors at bay. Behind every Hollywood romance was often a manager, a photographer, and a tightly choreographed script. For queer actors, life became a maze of secrecy, compromise, and coded survival. To be outed, even by rumor, was a career death sentence. Some stars, like Rock Hudson and Tab Hunter, were later revealed to have endured this system through manufactured relationships and silent suffering. Others weren't so lucky. Arrests, blacklists, and tabloid smear campaigns destroyed rising stars before they had a chance to fight back. In this world, Guy Madison moved with caution. His good looks were his currency, but also his cage. He was too valuable to the studios to be reckless, and too visible to ever let down his guard. Behind every posed smile on a red carpet was a calculation. Every word in an interview rehearsed. And behind closed doors, a network of whispers connected those who lived in the shadows, passing safety tips, trusted names, and unspoken rules of survival. The secret romances that bloomed in that darkness weren't just acts of love. They were acts of quiet rebellion, behind closed doors. The private romances. In the shadows of Hollywood's golden age, real intimacy didn't happen under chandeliers or on velvet couches. It lived in quiet apartments, hushed phone calls, and fleeting glances across studio lots. Guy Madison, with his chiseled looks and cautious demeanor, was no exception. Though the tabloids painted him as elusive or devoted to his craft, the truth whispered behind closed doors was far more complex. According to later interviews, biographical research, and a few brave voices who came forward after decades of silence, Madison had romantic ties with several men in the industry. Some whose names remain shrouded in mystery, and others who stood just as prominently on the marquee. Among them were rumors of late-night drives with Anthony Perkins, the brooding star of Psycho, whose own sexuality was a delicate dance of secrecy and suggestion. Perkins was known to move in the same underground circles of trusted companions, where safety came before passion. Then there were murmurs of a deeper bond with Rory Calhoun, another Hollywood heartthrob who, like Madison, lived a dual existence crafted by handlers and constrained by fear. These weren't tabloid flings or scandalous affairs. They were quiet connections, built on trust and shared vulnerability in an unforgiving era. They left no selfies, no letters, and no official acknowledgments, only hints, patterns, and accounts passed on like sacred lore. Those close to Madison spoke of private dinners, unlisted phone numbers, and long weekends away from prying eyes. In a world where a single photograph could ignite a firestorm, they loved in the margins. And it wasn't just about attraction, it was about survival. These men found in each other what the public never saw, someone who understood the loneliness behind the fame, the burden of playing a role that extended far beyond the screen. In those fragile, secret moments, they carved out a kind of freedom the world refused to offer. The dangerous game. Why Madison stayed quiet. For Guy Madison, silence was not merely a preference, it was protection. Every actor who navigated the treacherous terrain of old Hollywood knew the stakes, but for Madison, those stakes were doubly high. He wasn't just any actor. He was a masculine archetype, a cowboy, a war veteran, a poster pinned to thousands of bedroom walls. His entire career rested on a delicate illusion, one that studios had spent years and millions carefully manufacturing. To reveal the truth would not just tarnish his image, it could collapse the empire built around it. Madison had married actress Gail Russell in 1949, a union that many now view through a lens of strategic necessity rather than romantic passion. Their marriage didn't last, and neither did the press's interest in her after their divorce. But for Madison, it offered a brief respite from the rumors, a plausible narrative that kept the wolves at bay. Industry insiders say he kept his circle small and his public interactions even smaller. He declined interviews, turned down high-profile appearances, and stuck to safe roles that wouldn't invite too many questions. In private, he lived under a code of near paranoia, always watching who was around, always calculating who might talk. The fear wasn't abstract. Stories of entrapment, of undercover vice cops targeting gay men, of actors being blackmailed or having careers destroyed over whispered allegations, were all too real. The media had the power to exalt or annihilate with a single column inch. Madison, knowing the brutality of that power, chose silence. He may have loved deeply and sincerely, but his love had no place in the world he lived in. And so he buried it, not out of shame, but out of a grim understanding that the cost of honesty was exile. His silence was a sacrifice, one that protected the men he cared for, and perhaps himself most of all. The exposure, what he allegedly confessed. In the final chapters of his life, Guy Madison grew quieter still, retreating from the limelight, appearing only occasionally at film festivals or nostalgia events where aging stars were remembered more for who they were than who they truly loved. But in the silence of those later years, the whispers began to sharpen. Biographers, former companions, and a few bold voices in the LGBTQ+ community started piecing together fragments, stories long buried, conversations once spoken in hushed tones, and a few rare documents that hinted at a truth he never publicly acknowledged. According to one confidant, a longtime friend who remained anonymous until after Madison's passing in 1996, the actor had, in his final days, begun to unburden himself. In what was described as a moment of rare emotional vulnerability, Madison allegedly named several actors he had loved in secret, men whose names had graced the same marquees, shared the same anxieties, and who, like him, had been forced to perform not just on screen, but in life. Though no direct recordings or written confessions were ever made public, the accounts gained traction. A note, found among his belongings by a family member and quietly passed to a historian, alluded to living half a life and hiding a love that the world wasn't ready to see. Some dismissed it as speculation. Others, especially those who had seen him flinch when certain names were mentioned, or disappear from social gatherings when certain photographers arrived, believed it deeply. Perhaps it wasn't one confession, but many small ones. Quiet nods, knowing glances. A lifetime of coded language finally deciphered by those willing to read between the lines. In the end, what Guy Madison exposed may not have been a list of names, but a wound. One shared by so many like him. A reminder that behind every Hollywood legend, there's a person who once longed to be known, fully and without fear. Reckoning with the past. Why this story matters today. In the decades since Guy Madison first appeared on screen, the world has changed, but not without struggle. Today, actors can live more freely, speak their truths, and love openly without the crushing fear of career ruin. But these freedoms were built on the silent suffering of men like Madison, icons forced to wear masks so convincing they sometimes forgot who they were beneath them. Their stories matter not just because of who they loved, but because of what they endured to protect that love. Madison's tale is not unique. It's a thread in a much larger tapestry of Hollywood's hidden history, woven with secrecy, sacrifice, and the quiet courage of those who dared to feel in a world that demanded they suppress. By revisiting these stories now, we're not just indulging nostalgia or curiosity, we're reclaiming a truth that was denied for generations. Each account that surfaces, each confession that echoes decades later, chips away at the culture of silence that kept so many brilliant souls in the shadows. In telling Madison's story, we honor the legacy of those who lived in fear, so others could live in freedom. We remind ourselves that visibility is power, and that love, no matter how inconvenient or dangerous, has always existed beneath the surface of history, waiting for its moment to be seen. Guy Madison may never have shouted his truth from rooftops, but in the cracks of his silence, a new generation can now hear the words he never got to say. I loved, I was here, and I mattered. Closing thoughts. Secrets fade, but truth remains. In the end, the story of Guy Madison isn't just about who he may have loved or the names spoken only behind closed doors. It's about the high cost of invisibility in a world that demanded perfection over truth. Madison lived his life as a symbol of strength, charm, and masculine virtue, yet carried a quiet burden that few around him could see, and even fewer were allowed to understand. The shadows he lived within weren't just personal. They were institutional, systemic, and heartbreakingly normalized in the culture of old Hollywood. But as time erodes the golden lacquer of that era, what's left are not just the films and fame, but the people who lived half-lives beneath them. And from that fractured silence, something powerful emerges. Empathy, understanding, a new lens through which we view our idols, not as unreachable stars, but as human beings aching for authenticity. The courage to live openly, to love who you love without shame, may seem basic now, but it was revolutionary then. Guy Madison never had the chance to be celebrated for who he really was while he was alive. But perhaps, through remembrance, he can be honored now. Not just as a handsome cowboy of cinema's past, but as one of many who bore the weight of an unspoken truth. As the old photographs fade and the interviews grow distant, what remains is something deeper than celebrity, a legacy of quiet defiance, and a reminder that no secret lasts forever. If you believe these stories deserve to be heard, remembered, and respected, then consider subscribing to this channel. Because telling the truth, even when it arrives decades too late, still matters.